Wow, Mike Pence is going on the road in a big way. This from Politico. This weekend, he'll head to Pittsburgh for an event for Rick Saccone, a Republican running in a tight special election. Includes a February 16 stop in San Antonio for Will Hurd. The lawmaker represents the Texas-Mexico border. On February 21, he'll be in Naples, Florida for an NRCC event. In March alone, Pence plans to be in the Detroit area for the NRCC, Kentucky for Representative Andy Barr, Missouri for Josh Hawley's Senate bid, Ohio for Reps Steve Stivers, the chairman of the NRCC, New York for the NRCC, Minnesota, Iowa, and Pennsylvania. In April, he heads to North Carolina for Rep. Mark Walker, Omaha for Representative Don Bacon, and Nevada for Dean Heller, and Indiana for the NRSC. Now, the take in a lot of kind of pundit circles, well, in fact, this is the headline over at Daily Kos, Mike Pence's big plan for Republican victory in 2018 is Mike Pence everywhere, Donald Trump nowhere. You know, that may be the case. I think, though, that Mike Pence is thinking, you know, I might just be president a year from now, and I need to start establishing my bona fides. I need to start establishing good connections with all these people on the ground, make them loyal to me rather than Donald Trump, and, you know, set things up. What do you think? And which raises the question, if Trump goes and Pence comes in, is Pence going to continue the strongman routine of the Trump administration and the strongman praise? Declan Walsh wrote a fascinating piece in today's New York Times, the headline, "As Strongmen Steamroll Their Opponents, U.S. is Silent." And he started talking about el-Sisi, the president of Egypt, and how he has basically marginalized, imprisoned, or threatened to imprison everybody who presented a serious challenge to his presidency. The elections are coming up in a month or so. And so basically he's running against a bunch of obscure politicians nobody ever heard of and who can't campaign and don't have any money. So he's going to win, right? And Donald Trump hails this guy, you know, the el-Sisi, as a fantastic guy. Declan Walsh notes in today's Times, across the world, autocratic leaders are engaging in increasingly brazen behavior, rigging votes, muzzling the press, and persecuting opponents, as they dispense with even a fig leaf of democratic practice once offered to placate the United States or gain international legitimacy. That sounds pretty bad, right? Rigging votes, muzzling the press, and persecuting opponents, until you think that, hey, wait a minute. The vote is completely rigged in the United States. You've got this massive gerrymandering so that you get states like Pennsylvania that send almost twice as many Republicans to Congress as they do Democrats, yet Democrats very often win the state, right? Get more votes anyway, but they don't get more congressmen. And it's not just Pennsylvania, it's all across the United States. So, you know, the vote is rigged that way. We've got electronic voting machines, but most importantly, you've got massive voter suppression across the United States. You've got an effort that was running out of the White House with Chris Kobach of Kansas, aggressively removing people from the voting rolls. Millions of people all across the United States, particularly people of color, and young people and elderly people. I mean, they do not want young people to vote because young people know that every other developed country in the world provides free college education to their young people. And, you know, we could do that. They don't want old people to vote, retired people, people over 65, because they know that people over 65 are, shall we say, fond of Social Security and Medicare and don't want to see it privatized and turned over to Bank of America and United Healthcare, respectively. So they're suppressing the vote. I mean, these are the things that these guys are doing. They suppress the vote, they muzzle the press, and they persecute their opponents. So suppressing the vote, check it off. The Republicans are totally on board with this. I mean, massively on board with this. One of the states, I think it was Pennsylvania, one of the states whose Supreme Court I'm sorry, I don't have that story in front of me. I wrote it a couple days ago. The courts ordered them to redraw their congressional maps, and the leader of the House or Senate of that state said, "Nah, we're not going to do it." Yeah, good luck. This is, you know, typically what's called a constitutional crisis. Anyhow, in the New York Times, this article about all these authoritarians, the first thing they said they do is rig the votes. I mentioned that. The second thing is muzzling the press. What's the most effective way to muzzle the press? Start calling them fake news. Hitler called them the Lügenpresse, the lying press. Stalin went after the press. One of the first things he did, shut down what fragments remained after Lenin. Hitler shut down the press in 1934. I mean, it was just boom, that was it. Unless you're compliant, unless you're the German equivalent of Fox News, or the Russian equivalent of Fox, or the Soviet equivalent of Fox News, or whatever it may be. I mean, it's just, forget it. And Donald Trump has also proposed changing our libel laws in the United States so that when the press publishes something that he doesn't like, he can sue them and put them out of business. Sort of like what happened to Gawker. That was where, Gawker ran afoul of a cranky billionaire. In this case, we're talking about press running afoul of a cranky president. And he wants to have, a billionaire actually can sue much more easily, claiming that he has some right to privacy, he's not an elected official, than somebody who has chosen to put themselves in the public light and eye, like Donald Trump did, and become president of the United States. So rigging votes, check it off here in the U.S. I mean, they're talking about Cambodia, India with Modi, El-Sisi in Egypt, Duterte in the Philippines, I mean, Erdogan in Turkey. All over the world, we've got these authoritarian regimes rising up, and they all do three things consistently. They rig the votes, they shut up the press or discredit the press and attack the press, and they persecute their opponents. They go after their opponents. And it's happening in Russia, too. You see this right across the board. And the persecuting of opponents, Donald Trump doesn't just say, hey, I disagree with Hillary Clinton on this policy. It's like, oh, no, she's crooked Hillary. Or even, I disagree with Marco Rubio on policy. No, it's little Marco. And worse than that, I mean, going after people using the mechanisms of government to do so. There's something very, very, very poisonous going on in Washington, D.C. right now among Republicans. Devin Nunes is the tip of the iceberg, I believe. By the way, we'll get into this, at another point, but weird stuff going on with Devin Nunes in Portugal. It's totally strange. Anyhow, I'll get back to that when I've done a little more research on it. In Cambodia, the New York Times writes today, Declan Walsh writes today for the Times, in Cambodia, Prime Minister Hun Sen led a sweeping crackdown on opponents before elections this summer. Mr. Trump flashed a big thumbs up as he posed for a photo with Mr. Hun Sen, who later praised the American president for what he called Trump's lack of interest in human rights. Right. When your president is popular among dictators, look out. Experts say his warm embrace of hardline leaders like President Rodrigo Duterte of the Philippines, this is the guy who has, personally killed people, has been responsible for something like 10,000 deaths that we know of in the Philippines so far. They say that Trump's warm embrace of Duterte has only encouraged his worst excesses. Putin, Erdogan, Duterte, Sisi. Last year, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said values like freedom and human dignity, values, quote, create obstacles to advancing American security and economic interests. Right. So if we want to be sure to prop up some oil petro, the Saudis or something, a repressive regime, yeah, we can do that, no problem. We need their oil. Or economic interests, we need to mine their things. As Samantha Power said, brutal thugs are smiling. Human rights are not only U.S. values, they're universal. Trump-Tillerson approach is green light for repression.